Hey, good day, everyone. This is Dr. Inla. I'm a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, speech and language therapist. And today we have a very amazing guest from USA. And he's a therapist and he's working with autism. And this is mentioned in his bio that he is working on the aspect that where autism and mental health meet the criteria. Because a lot of people think that autism is a disorder with children, like those who have autism, so those are children, and they never get this idea that those who have autism and those who are children, one day they are going to grow, be elder, they're adult, and they will still have the autism. So let's request our esteemed guest to introduce himself. Yes, Sean, over to you. I would like you to introduce yourself.
Esteemed,
Yeah, you are.
esteemed feels a bit like grand for what I actually am. I'm just a guy. I have autism, and I do therapy with people with autism and other mental health disorders, and I do some other stuff too. But that's really the nuts and bolts of my life.
Okay. So I don't think so, because you said that esteem is a big word. For me, those individuals who are working with autism and who are working with children, and for them who think that mental health is important aspect of the everyday's life, because we start yesterday, day before. I mean, in last week, I was discussing with a lady. She was a trauma therapist, and during discussion we come to this idea, like when we talk about trauma, then we talk about PTSD, and when it is PTSD, then we talk about those people who came back from the war. They don't understand that it could be other problem as well. Those things which we think are depression, this could be trauma as well. It could be some living trauma. It could be some incident that triggered that feeling. So PTSD is not just war related thing. It could be the whole life. So if we talk about mental health problem, those who have autism, they have a personality too. So they can, and they are neurodivergent people. So if we talk about neurodivergent personalities, they are too much prone to have depression and anxiety. I currently I'm working with adult patient, and they might have anxieties, they might have panic attacks, they might have be suicidal. So we clearly don't talk about these things. We think that even for us, autism, adult with autism are just like disappear, like they don't even exist. So what do you think about that? Why people don't think that adults have autism too? Or you all the time you are thinking that a child with no speech. So autism is not just no speech. Autism is not just sitting span. Autism is a broader word. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of agreement on what autism is and not necessarily what causes it.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is you use the word neurodiversity, and part of that, right, like, is a increasingly globally accepted idea of increased acceptance for difference in behavior and ideas. And that's a beautiful thing, right? But it premises on the idea of differential wiring, which now, since 1994, since Judy Singer put it out, there is no evidence to support that. And so when I think about autism, I don't know that it really matters if it's differential wiring or not, but I do think having a more credible way of looking at it makes sense to me. I'm a big proponent of polyvagal theory, sort of the same theory that undergirds a lot of trauma treatment, whether it's EMDR, sensory motor, or TFCBT, some of those somatic bodily responses. I look at autism as being entirely the difficulties in social engagement, or a dampened social engagement system, which leads to anxiety, which leads to deficits in eye contact and emotional regulation and emotional reading, right? I don't look at autism as a lifelong enduring condition. I look at it as a chronic state of threat. So
Yeah,
does that answer your question?
I think somehow you get, because the thing is that we actually need to look into different perspective, because it is a somatic condition. If we talk about sensory processing disorder, so I don't think so sensory processing disorder is something different than ASD or ADHD or autism, because at the end of the day, what we are going to do is how to work with these children, how we are going to teach these children how to be independent person, how to use these sensory motor areas to, because those children don't understand that they have to use their senses together. Like for them, sensory is a different thing, hearing, like they're hearing something different, they're looking something different, they don't even know how to use their body, they don't even know how to work in coordination. So I think that we have to work on their skills building activities. We have to teach them how to use 2 3 senses together. That's why we are using a lot of fine motor activity. That's why we are using a lot of music and rhythm. I think those children get rhythm so fast. That is the reason they're all the time too much obsessed with the the lyrics. They're too much obsessed with the rhymes. They're too much obsessed with the the numbers. They're too much obsessed with the ABC, because it is so rhythmic and they will stay constant. So this is what I think. And I think I really like the way you answer this question, that uh, because it's not just like people think that there's somebody with autism, the child with autism or person with autism, he's not able to get this idea that how to read the emotions, how to respond to the emotion, or how to get the social cue. So I really like the answer that you said, that it's a social deficit. Okay, let me ask you something. Do you work with the girls as well who have autism?
Yep.
Okay, I would ask you another question as well, because since you have autism and you are working with children as well. Do you think the new definition came of the autism, like they put everything in the spectrum, like ADHD, ADD, SPD? Are these the same condition, or these are different condition for you?
These are all different conditions of the vagus nerve. Well, I don't know about sensory processing, but ADHD can be explained in polyvagal language. PTSD can be explained in polyvagal language. Depression can be explained in polyvagal language. So can autism.
Okay.
They're all, I look at them as expressions of human form, but I do think they're distinct for a reason, right? Like I think we went from 4 in the DSM-5 TR, and now we're up to, we had 4 in the DSM-4, we had 1 in the DSM-5, and we have 2. And so no, I think, right, ADHD looks a lot more like differential wiring and neuroplasticity than autism does. I think they're very distinct. I think, right, it's affecting the same parts of the body, yes, but I don't think they manifest the same way. I think, like when I think about ADHD, I think about hyperarousal, right? Like I think of somebody who's well out of that window and super hyper
And
vigilant
they're
all the
impulsive
time.
also, impulsive, doing things without even thinking about that. And after that, they will feel guilty that we did something. That's the reason. Whenever the children are playing, they just push each other. They even don't get this idea that we are doing this. So I think these are impulsive acts. So you don't agree to the new classification of they put everything in the autism.
No, I think we have different classes again, and I'm in the US, so I don't know how it works in Pakistan, but no, ADHD and autism are not the same thing. They're distinct things. They have been for decades now, and I think the decades of research support that.
So you during you were giving me the answer. You talk about polyvagus now. Or, I would like you to explain a little bit more. I would like you to explain depression, autism, and ADHD.
All right, so let me explain polyvagal theory, and I think it'll fit together better. Can I share my screen, or is that not a possibility?
I don't think so. Let me try to make you host. I'm not that much. I think I need to.
It's okay. It's okay if I can't. I'm just curious if I can or not.
I think I have to make you host actually. I don't know. I can
Can
do it
you
or
do
not.
that or no?
I don't know. I can do it or not. Okay, make a host. Let me make you host. Then you have.
Yay.
Should I make you host so that you can share your screen? Okay.
Yep.
Then you have to turn me back host. I by the way, I don't have to share anything, but it's okay.
All right, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. So when you see this picture of this baby, how do you feel?
Yeah, I can see this.
Okay, so when you see this picture of this baby, how does it make you feel?
I mean, the baby is very warm. He's happy. He's compassionate, and
Yeah.
he's looking toward his mother, and he's trying to communicate that I am safe, I'm happy, I have
But how
positive
do
energy when
you
you're around.
but how do you feel when you see that?
This is how I feel actually.
Okay, so you feel warm, compassionate,
Yeah.
accepted. So if I gave you some bad news right now, how do you think you'd handle it?
You can tell me. I mean, maybe it might be part of some test, but I cannot say anything.
So it'd be pretty easy, right? Like we're looking at this baby, you could handle some bad news because your attention, right, is on this baby. And so what Dan Siegel calls this, right, is us being in our window of tolerance. So we think about it in terms of being grounded, flexible, open, curious, present, able to emotionally self-regulate. What happens when we can't stay in that because our environment or something is too distressing is then we go into what's called hyperarousal. And so often our bodies look like one of these two things, right? There's the fight. This kid beats up this kid. This is what my kids do. And then there's the flight, right? Like this, I'm going to try to escape. And so we do that emotionally and physically and cognitively, one of those two strategies, right? And so generally anxiety, high energy, anger, overwhelm, hypervigilance, fight, flight, and chaotic, right? Like there's just all those expressions of fight, flight, freeze, and hyperarousal. Hypoarousal is sort of when the brain shuts off, brain numbs out, we dissociate, right? So if we think about all those disorders in these terms, right? Anxiety, probably the easiest of these. There's a lot of avoidance. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, I'm going to flee this situation. Begins to look a lot like these expressions. Depression, right? Like falls right in hypoarousal. And so hypoarousal, right? When we're shut down, this part of our brain, the vagus nerve really shuts down, right? Like our motivation, which is a huge, and we shut down, we feel less, we feel numb, we feel sad, right? Like, and so depression can be explained that way too. I mean, and ADHD, I really think you can explain like is sort of some of both of these things. Like you have the hyperactivity, right? Or hypervigilance, depending on what you want to call it. Dissociation can look a lot like not being focused. Attention deficit, the hyperactivity, right? The high energy. I mean, pretty soon, right? Like whether or not you're in this window becomes pretty damn important. And so I think you can explain autism the same way, right? So when we define autism, the 802 way, which is an instrument used to measure autism, social interaction difficulties, social aspects of communication, restrictive, repetitive interests and behaviors, pretty soon what we find is that all these traits can be found outside of the window of tolerance. So when you're outside of it, you can be more autistic or less autistic, right?
The good news is I am already, and I recently found that out, by the way. Even I was working with these children. I did not have the slightest idea. They used to call me ADHD actually. You know, the person I was working with, that my trainer was got so much tantrums, I would say.
Well, and what's crazy, right? Like is that people with autism, right? Like they have lower heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is the distance between two.
My body temperature is very low also. I got a low body temperature.
So you have low heart rate variability?
Maybe sometime, but my body temperature is low. I mean, it's below 96.
Oh, your body temperature is low.
Much. Like I feel a lot of cold. Like even I'm at the moment I am sitting in a hot room and the fan is off. I am just even sweating. Even then I am okay.
That's fantastic. Well, I do this to illustrate, right? Like the heart rate variability, the distance between these two waves.
Hot coffee with me. I'm going to drink it.
But you got to wake up somehow, right? Like, but the distance, right? Like when they're really close together, it's lower.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to stay in this window and look less autistic when your heart rate's going like this.
Yeah.
Right? Versus when it's going like this. And there's 3 studies now that confirm that people with autism look a lot more like this on average. Yeah. And so I think about it polyvagally. I think about it being a disorder of a dampened social engagement system, right? So really we can, in theory, right, we can modulate any of these mental health conditions. And so, no, I don't think they're all the same, but yes, I do think they're all connected.
This is what I actually believe also, that they're different things. And when we talk about autism, so the behavior, we just talk about behavior, like the child is social or child is not social. The child is talking, the child is not talking. The child is looking toward you, the child is not looking toward you. The child is, giving eye contact, the child is not giving eye contact. So, it's all about behavior thing. We don't have, even we could say, we don't have measure to, you could say, what is going on over here. And that is a complex system, by the way. I mean, you cannot get the idea what is going on inside the mind unless the child starts speaking. So, you want to go?
No, just give me 1 second. I'm giving my son a hug. Your stomach something? I'll be right back. You want to wave, Shiloh, to all the guests over in Pakistan? This is Shiloh. He's definitely one of those people.
Okay, so like I really like the idea that, like you were mentioning about the heart rate, and I think it's very relevant as well. So there's a notion about autism that people say that those who have autism have OCD. So what do you think about that? I mean, OCD is also a different thing than a autism.
I don't think they're the same. I don't think you can have both. And again, research is really split on that. Some people say you can, other people say you can't. I fall in the camp that says you can't have both, because one can be cured, the other, right, like theoretically is pretty enduring, right? Like one is a chronic threat state, one's an extreme form of anxiety, and those are just, while in both related to the vagus nerve, right? Like you can get reimbursed for OCD in the US and not for autism, for the reason that, right, like research again and again and again shows that autism can't be cured, whatever that means. But I don't know that I agree with this idea that autism is a static lifelong condition, but I think it is more static than, say, OCD, because OCD with exposure therapy can be modulated, and the restrictive repetitive interests, right, serve very different functions. In OCD, it's about relieving pressure. Like you were just saying off camera, we all have hyperfocus when we are on the spectrum. And that, right, like really is about fulfillment. It's not about reduction of pressure.
And there is other thing as well. If you talk about autism, I think the repetitive movements and repetitive behavior, the stereotypical movement, I think they associated that thing with OCD is a whole new you could say diagnosis. So people are trying to put that thing under autism, but for me, what I feel is that those repetitive movements are known to children who have autism and who even with adult as well. So they will indulge in same thing because sameness is which don't give them anxiety. So being anxious is something else, and having anxiety is something else. Anxieties are bigger, it is something else, and you have
anxiety is its own
medication as well. I mean, you take medication for anxiety, but I don't think so that other than hyperactivity or maybe sleep problems, sleep deprivation, you go for medication, or maybe you have some kind of gut issue, you go for medication. So maybe you are going to take something for other thing, but people are trying to do, because that was unknown. If we talk about the history, people used to think that who are schizophrenic have autism. So we have to do, even a lot of research is going on, and still they don't even get the idea that what is going on or what is the cause of autism. And what I think is that, like if you talk about diagnosis, if people ask me to diagnose that, okay, our child have autism. Okay, so I said that even if your child had autism, what you're going to do? I mean, they don't have answer for that. I would say that you are now going to put a glasses for your child, because I was working with a mother and she used to say, my child is very naughty, my child is doing this thing, my child is not sitting in the chair, my child is doing this stuff. I asked her, do you have other children? She said that I have three children. And I said that what they are doing. She said that I think they are more naughty than my autistic child. So, and they are sometimes, breaking stuff. They're sometimes breaking the door. They're sometimes messing all the time at the house. So I said that, what about your child who have autism? She said that he don't do that. He will stay with me all the time and he will listen to me and he will give my stuff, me back. He will bring my shoes if I'm going somewhere, and he will, but I mean, he was more compassionate, more listening to me. So I said that you get this idea that he have this kind of condition. So now you are putting too much effort and too much, you could say, too much focus on that child. Instead, you are just trying to, you have to take that child like the other kid. If you will do that, you're going to save your energy and you're going to, save your child from sibling rivalry. What do you think about that? I mean, like a lot of children used to say that our mother don't pay attention to us. mother whole attention is toward that child who have this kind of condition.
So are you asking me what do I think of sibling rivalries,
Yeah,
or what do I
what
think
do
of
you opinion
autism
about
and so?
sibling rivalry and how parents should, because you're a parent as well. So how a parent need to, balance these things.
I mean, I think it's a lot of grace for myself because I get angry at my kids, and I love being a dad, and being a dad's hard, and watching my kids fight sometimes, right? Like, I'm not perfect, but at the same time, right? Like, I have to be the regulating force in their lives because children transactionally regulate emotions. We learned anything from the still faces experiment, it's that kids don't know how to emotionally regulate, and they learn it from their parents.
Mhm.
And so when we don't regulate our feelings, so like sometimes there will be like times where I'm like, everybody gets a timeout because dad needs a timeout.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
sometimes I'll go ahead.
Okay. So do you think that sometimes parents ask me the question that they have a child with autism, so can they conceive again because maybe the next child might have autism too? What is your opinion about that?
I think twin studies show that there's a higher propensity during twinhood of
Mhm.
having autism, and there's some data on siblings. I don't really know a whole lot about it.
Mhm.
As somebody who has two kids, I don't think either of my kids have autism. And I think, right, consulting a genetic counselor is usually a great idea for that kind of thing. I also kind of can understand when people have a kid that's really, really difficult, who, like, say, stabs another kid, like they might be leery to want to have another kid. And so I don't know. I tend to keep a pretty open mind on this with people because I think there's no right answer for this kind of thing. It's really super like, what's your experience with your first kid like?
You get these kind of questions like parent over study these things, and sometimes they are getting a lot of negative things from those which are not relevant. So sometimes you have to be ready for unexpected question. Okay, let's talk about your autism. When you were diagnosed, or you were underdiagnosed, or not under the radar of autism, or you were called some a child who is very naughty, who don't sit in the class, or something like that. When you were diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed at 18 after I had a car wreck. Um, I, God, what did I do? Did a lot. Hold on, I gotta think about this for a second. Where am I going with this? Bear with my brain, it's slow. I was diagnosed at 18 after a car wreck. Life was pretty rough. I left the scene of a car wreck. You think they teach you to like stay at the scene of the accident, but they never actually write that in the book that you need to stay after the scene of an accident. They're like, that's a little weird. And so I faced felony charges at the time, and they got expunged, but one of the things they really looked at was how does my brain function and how does that connect to all the other dots. And so I got diagnosed with autism at 18, and it really didn't come back till I went to family court to fight for my kids. And they were like, can people with autism parent? Because the judge had a daughter with autism that was much more severe than mine.
Mhm.
And so even though I was a licensed social worker at the time, it didn't matter because I had autism. And so then it's come more into play as I've worked on my own mental health. And I mean, it still plagues me, right? Like there are moments I'm rigid and very like, I need it this way. And it's usually when I'm outside my window or I'm burned out and I'm stressed out. Like I can think of an example from work where I definitely was less than kind to my boss. And she called me on it, and she was right to call me on it. So
Okay, so if we talk about, like you said that you were diagnosed at the age of 18. If we go to your childhood, so did you classically, you could say that classically bust some criteria of bookish autism, that you don't have language at the age of 3? You could you could say degrade your language, and your autism get stuck you at the age of 3, and it would be where you will not have friendship, you will forget all the language you learn, you will forget all the skills you learn. So did you face these things, or it's actually a myth? Because I actually believe that we don't see a child with autism by a book. What is your opinion about that? Yes, I feel that now.
Okay.
Okay,
What's your question?
I was talking that, like you said, that you were diagnosed at the age of it. Should I need to repeat the question? Do I need to repeat the question? Okay, I just said that, like, you were diagnosed at the age of 18. If we go back toward your early childhood, so that is a classical, myth. I would not say myth because the criteria that at the age of 3, your autism will, come, and the language you learn, the skill you learn are going to deteriorate somehow, and your emotional, your social emotional development might be slow, or no, not according to age appropriate. So did you met that criteria, or you just passed that criteria? I mean, just like, that was not under radar.
I mean, they were dealing with their own shit, and it was the 90s, and we didn't have all this information that we have now. Like, it was just a very different diagnosis back then. Like, early diagnosis was just becoming a thing in 94 in US. Like, it didn't really, like, Ivar Lovaas studies didn't really hit till 94, 95. Like, I was 5 or 6 by then, and I was in school, right? Like, they didn't know what these things were. They were still diagnosing at a rate of like 1 in 144. I mean, it was way higher back then in the United States, and it just, I don't even think it crossed their minds. So I couldn't tell you because I don't remember that far. Most of my memories from that time in my life are pretty traumatic and not great. So I mean, there's some trauma.
Your own imagination at that time. Too much imaginary play at that time. Every autistic have a imaginary friend, so they are too much busy in playing with them. Do you know this idea?
Yeah, no, I did sometimes want to have friends.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of case, it was sort of mixed, but my parents also weren't really equipped to be looked.
Can you hear me? Because it's a little bit stuck. Can you hear me?
For these things because their own.
Yes, we are back. We are back. So I just heard that you want to have friend little bit gist of what you are saying. Now you can hear me.
Oh,
Yes,
I can hear you now. So what I said was I wasn't a classic case one way or the other. It was kind of a mixed bag. Yeah, like I had friends, I didn't have friends, I had really strange interests. I really liked Legos. That was the thing. But I would build all kinds of things, and I would go outside and I would play with friends, and I don't know, I did all the things of a normal childhood, I guess. I've never really thought about having a childhood as autistic because I didn't learn about my autism until I was basically a full-grown adult. So I don't know. I had a childhood, right? Like
childhood
I didn't have them.
And you know why
just
I
never really
asked you the question? For example, I was just in a support group. A mother asked me a question that my child is having too much imaginary play. So I said that, why don't you share your child videos? So she was playing with a doll. I just said that, why you suspect that your child have autism? So she said that I am giving too much screen time, because that is my next question as well. Because that Einstein autism came, visual autism or virtual autism is a new phenomenon nowadays. Maybe the COVID give you this new phenomenon of virtual autism. What do you think about this virtual autism? Or you did not heard of this myth or this terminology?
Nope.
Okay, let me explain to you. They think that the language delay is because of too much screen time.
Huh.
Let me explain you
Interesting.
how it might affect you, because there are few study about that, but it could relate to this idea somehow. That but that study was about adult, those who have relationship. That study was that if you're using too much social media, if you're using too much screen and you're using too much mobile phone, then you forget to read the social cues. Like you forget to read the facial expression, you don't know how to read the facial expression, stuff like that. So it was,
I
more
don't,
like that. So do you
I don't
have
buy
this
that.
idea, or this is just a myth coming from some side?
I just think it's a myth coming from a bunch of people who are trying to get published. Like I said, I'm
That
very
is the point actually.
polyvagal about it. And when you look at somebody who's scared, right? Like if you're rock climbing and you're like, it's really hard to make eye contact. It's really hard to read your emotions
Yeah.
because you're in a chronic state of threat. And so no, I mean, I suppose screen time, if it like was scary enough or
Mhm.
put you in a chronic state of threat, or like you watch porn too early in life, that could have an impact. But barring those really traumatic things, I don't really
Because
buy
it
that
is a too
screen
much,
time.
it is too much, even I'm asked as mother, why did you suspect that your child have autism? I mean, if she don't have autism, the point is that it become a fancy term as well, because there are few, I don't want to take the name of few boards. There are a few boards over here. It's not from Pakistani board, but it's abroad board. They're giving some kind of certification to some kind of different, some specific kind of a therapy. So those people are into too much, you could say, uh, promoting that idea, so that people come to them for the issue. There are there could be 10 reasons why your child is with language delay. It's not just about autism. It could be any reason. It could be motor reason, it could be logical reason, it could be an accident that your child get into the child's, I give them the point that if a person who have stroke and who can get language, why don't a child who have autism cannot get language? So I think thanks for clarifying the myth, by the way, because this is a very
I
common
mean,
question.
it could be it could be, right? Like, I don't know. I think we're all leaning on our own theoretical concepts as professionals. The theoretical construct I like is polyvagal theory because it makes sense how at some points in my life and others I have been more or less autistic. It's a really interesting question of having an autistic childhood. I never really considered it, but it kind of fits. Because
So
I suppose, right? I don't think about myself like as necessarily defined by a diagnosis. I'm like, I'm Sean and I have some traits that are not so great sometimes, right? Like this fight with my boss. I think about how, right, like she sent out an email and I was just very rigid. And like that to me feels very autistic, right? Like I was probably out of my window because I was burned out. I was doing my doctorate and I just not a fan of this lady to begin with. So between my bias,
yeah,
my own burnout, and my own like having a doctorate like shoved down into my head, right? Like that made for some very autistic behaviors.
yeah. I guess, for example, in my start of career, I was working with just a girl came to me. There was a small girl, and that girl had CP, like she was cerebral palsy, and the level was like she was almost on wheelchair. So I said this to her mother, that your child had this kind of condition, and your child is not going to outgrow from that condition, and we can just work with her different skill. We can work with her, some social skill. We cannot do anything about that. So I was called into the office and they said, why did you say that? I said, tell me the way how to communicate that to parent. I mean, they said that use some other word. I asked them, give me some other word to communicate this to parent. I mean, she, created a lot of fun, and I just said, okay, I just tell her the reality. What is the reality? And this is going to save her a lot of time, a lot of efforts, a lot of maybe, money as well, because she will go to different doctors, and if the different doctor give her different opinion, this is costing her money as well. So I'm just saving her time. He said that people are not ready for that. I said that when people are going to ready for that reality. I mean, this is the condition of the child, and I think they should maybe praise the fact that I was straightforward. So for me, straightforward is a too much artistic thing, and for you, maybe being rigid is a too much artistic thing. So everybody have their
Well,
own.
being direct, right, like is a really interesting phenomenon because it varies depending on what part and region of the world you're in, right? Like in the United States, on the East Coast, people are very direct. In my family of origin, people are direct, like to a very uncomfortable degree.
Yeah.
But like my boss working with schools, she doesn't just go in and say, Sean can only do Thursdays. She goes in and says, hey, what days of the week do you want him to do? Oh, well, those days don't work for him, right? Like there's a politic to it. And one is very different than the other. And I would argue that for me, right, like I'm not very good at the politic thing.
Yeah, that is a point actually.
I'm
Politics is
just
a
not
bad.
very what?
It's not a good thing actually. Politics. You cannot fight with that politics actually.
Well, but they're important. They're an art form that makes business work. And and then some of the stuff I do with autism, I wish I was better at it because I'd probably market myself better if I were, but I just don't care enough. So I don't know.
I mean, because maybe you're not that much, maybe hungry, or people have that other kind of expectation. Maybe they can get something out of you. Like people are with other people, just maybe they can get some kind of benefit from you. So it's always about that because they don't want to talk to you unless they have some kind of so-called interest in you, or maybe they want to use you. Maybe they want to use your doctorate actually. So people are like that. I mean, they think that they can get anything from you, but I don't think so. They can. But what could they? What they're going to get from you? Can they take your?
Well, like, I mean, like if I want to give my knowledge out, I charge money for it, right? Like this I'm doing because I find it interesting. Because Pakistan is very different than the United States. And I think it's interesting that you're both a speech pathologist and a therapist and a psychologist. Because that is a hell of a lot of education, which means you must be very smart, probably smarter than I am.
This is my hyper focus actually. I'm
I can
working with
believe that.
adult and I'm working with child and I'm working with family as well because I'm doing psychotherapy as well. So
Very cool.
different by the way. Maybe sometimes it's
What?
too much for me. So okay, let me tell. Let's just talk about your hyper focus. What is your hyper focus?
I mean, I like rock climbing. I like mountain biking. I like autism and mental health. I know way too much about evidence-based practice. That's what my dissertation is in. I did a study on physical exercise. I'm working on a grant with Mayo Clinic right now on training. One of my big areas is increasing access to healthcare for people with autism. That's probably a hyper focus. So like I'm working on this grant award with Mayo Clinic to try and increase access through a quality improvement project through an internal grant through a university I'm affiliated with. And so it's super fascinating, like training clinicians. Like this has sort of become my own work of life is training clinicians. So I've done it through HESI, I've done it through universities, I've done it through foundations, I've worked for state governments. I mean, this is sort of a side hustle, but it's been incredibly lucrative, an incredibly short amount of time. And so that I find that and evidence-based practice development is sort of my other area. I really want to see sensory motor psychotherapy become more bent towards autism, not sensory motor therapy, but sensory motor psychotherapy created by Pat Ogden, which is sort of born out of the word of Ron Kurtz from the Hakomi method. And so it's very much towards body mindfulness. And I love, and I do this every month. I meet with a group of trauma therapists and we are working on just how do you work with people with autism and trauma.
Okay, so that is a different thing by the way, because it is too much of people are focusing too much on speech and speech and speech and speech and speech. Even behavior is not focused sometimes, or sometimes they are just focusing on behavior. Speech will come. So what I feel is that people are not working in alignment. They think focus this, focus this, focus this therapy, focus this therapy. They don't understand that we have to work in a collaborative way because a child have to go to the playground, a child have to go to school, a child have to go to market. So why these parents face problem when the child is going to market? Why the child is having some kind of temper tantrum? Because they don't even know. They just know about if it is autism or if it is ADHD or if it's a related condition, then the child should just speak only. And I have heard this statement that if the child would speak, then all problem is going to resolve. They don't understand that there's something called functional speech. There's something called emotional, emotional thing. There's something called comprehension. There's something called, situation things matter. And the what question, what, why, when, where, you need to prepare your child for that. So they're not even getting this idea, and nobody's telling them anything. I mean, for marketing, they're just, they will just come from outside and they will just give them training. I mean, 40-hour training is not enough for a person to do a treatment of a child. I mean, it could take a lot of time to understand that child. So you don't get this idea, and people are promoting this thing. That's why, they just want to, people stay in, less knowledgeable. So they should not start ask questions from the therapist. And even therapists are not, sometimes therapists are, misjudging them as well. Okay, so your hyper focus is mountain climbing and your work, and your more kind of, not psycho, sorry, sensory motor thing. What
Sensory
about
motor psychotherapy
sensory motor
and
psychotherapy?
access to mental health care for people with autism.
So
Hence the phrase where autism and mental health meet.
yeah, they're actually same thing for me. Child mental health is also mental health. So you cannot separate the mental health from the diagnosis. They're both, they are same thing.
Right, right. And in a lot of systems in the United States, they do that. They separate mental health. How is it in Pakistan? Do they separate it? Do they keep it all as one?
The condition is very different over here, by the way. I mean, people, the autism is underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed over here. I mean, if
So
a
it's-
child underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed over here.
You gotta unpack this for me.
Okay, let me explain you. For example, if they don't understand anything, like, so the child is get out of the school. I mean, they will just literally throw the child from the school, and the child might have autism. The girls might have autism. Okay, let me explain you something else. If a child is little hyper, the child is not sitting in the chair. The child is good in education, very good in education. The child is thrown out of the school because the child have autism. So it's more like that. I mean, for them, every condition is autism. So that's how I'm saying that is overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. People don't understand this.
Well, it's totally different here, right? Like we have so many clusters of disability, ranging from physical impairments to neurocognitive. Right? I had a discussion with a policy analyst and it made my head go round. She does not believe that Medicaid should reimburse autism, which frustrates the hell out of me as a person with autism, because she says even though it's in the DSM-5, it doesn't deserve to be reimbursed. It's like, are you kidding me? It's in the DSM-5. Same with Alzheimer's, and you reimburse that and treatment for that. So why aren't you reimbursing treatment for this? And it just,
why don't you
I mean,
treatment for mental health actually? I mean, you just need to cross effect of mental health then. Like mental health don't exist. Mental health is here. It's the whole life. So
well, it's the whole body. That's
exactly.
why sensory motor psychotherapy, right? The
And
body is where all those
you
behaviors
don't have the idea how to connect body and mind actually. This is what I believe, and I think the work you are doing is in align that thing, that these things are actually together. So when we are working with children, and we have to work on their all senses, all integration, so that it work in integration. That's why I actually like sensory integration therapy. I really like that therapy. I will use it in my therapy sessions, and it's going to help a lot. It's going to help a lot while you're working with a child. And when he started, sorry, you want to say something?
Which therapy?
Sensory
Yeah, which therapy did you say?
Sensory integration. It's some form of OT thing, but you can integrate, because when you're working as a therapist, you definitely have to use these tools, because I think eclectic approach is a better approach instead of just doing one thing and just doing other thing. So I just use
Well, like what makes sense.
Every therapist.
What makes sense.
You need to be creative.
So what makes sensory motor psychotherapy? So it's about body mindfulness, right? And it's really about separating the traumatic. I mean, its origins are in trauma therapy.
Yeah.
When I use it with autism, I'm still using it with trauma. But I look at a lot of its underlying work, like where it's being developed is in parts. And like with people with autism, what I find is there's a lot of strategy going to reason and not feeling, and avoidance and dissociation. And granted, I work with some pretty complex clients. I work with people with DID, and I work with people with complex trauma and autism. pretty regularly. Like that, I work in community mental health. I don't work in private practice. It's not about being the expert here. It's about serving the population at this point. So, yeah.
Okay, uh, let's talk a little bit about your dissertation. So, is it also about that you just said that trauma? Let me uh, make it right. You said that sensory motor psychotherapy. So, your dissertation is about that.
My dissertation was about autism and using physical exercise
Okay.
as an intervention
Okay.
with sensory motor psychotherapy, psychoeducation. And so really what makes sensory motor psychotherapy great is that it talks a lot about body language, which is a real area that when you have autism, right, like you don't learn nonverbal social cues. And the way I explain this to people who don't have autism, when they're like, what's your hyperfocus? I'm like, trying to explain to people body language, right? Like that's a really interesting thing, especially if you have no idea how to read it and you have no idea about intent and you have no idea about like what people's body language means unless you just ask, which is an awkward thing to do.
And
it's not like I can be like,
a lot of they are too much susceptible to have bullying and being used by other people. People are taking advantage of them. So I think it's a better way to teach them this thing, so somehow they're able to defend themselves, because sometimes it happens that they are used and they don't even understand that we are being used into different circumstances, maybe from their financial gain, and maybe the topic is sensitive, but they're also abused. They're being abused, and I was there was a person, and he said that his dissertation was about sexual abuse and autism, and I requested that person so many times, let's talk about that thing, let's talk about that, and even he agreed to that thing. I was doing that session online. That was live session. But still, I'm trying to get to that person, and that person is not ready to talk about that. No, Baba.
any other questions?
Okay. I think your time is.
We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. So, by the way, that was nice talking to you and having different perspective of because I'm doing this session for quite a while. Maybe you have seen in my profile, and I will share my Facebook page as well. Maybe you could go there, and that was a different discussion that we have today. And I really liked the discussion, and I would like to take your concluding remark. So then we are going to close this discussion.
You're welcome to use it. You're welcome to share it. I don't do this. I mean, I do this for financial gain at some points, but my end goal isn't money. My end goal is just seeing people get access to mental health who have conditions like I do, and conditions like the clients I serve and you serve, right? So if this can be helpful to anyone, by all means. I'm not on Facebook because of what I do. I just
Not
not a thing.
Maybe I'm, a day before yesterday, somebody said to me that you are doing something, and you need to bring to that much people. I said that I cannot bring that many people. I don't have friends actually, and she was not believing me. She said that you're very social and stuff like that. She don't understand that I'm just overcompensating this point of view, like not having friends, because when how I started all this, because this I am serving community. I'm serving those children who have this condition, and I'm serving the parent as well, so that they get maximum idea what this condition is. And it's not just about autism. Their own mental health is also at stake, and they are not even thinking about that. And
what about you though?
Sorry?
What about you and having friends and slowing down and enjoying and appreciating the good life that you have in front of you?
Maybe, but I see things in different perspective. When I am overwhelmed, then I start watching my movies, and I'm a big fan of superheroes. A big fan
You're
of
a big
Marvel,
fan of superhero movies?
Yeah.
Which ones?
All of them.
All of them.
I just have to watch Doctor Strange 2, by the way. It's my laptop. So it could be Flash, it could be Superman, Flash, Arrow, all of them. Wonder Woman, Supergirl.
I'm a big fan of chick flicks. I watched Pretty Little Liars recently, and now I've moved on to the Julia Child documentary series on HBO. Before that, it was Gilmore Girls. These are all my guilty pleasures.
But I'm all about superheroes. I love watching them. I mean,
that's so cool.
All of them.
See, there's your real interest. You missed your calling. You need to be a superhero.
I am a superhero.
Well, I mean, not like the kind that.
You know, a superhero have to save everyone, and they have to put their own need backside. So maybe I'm a superhero.
That is not a sustainable way to live. I'm serious. You think I'm kidding?
What the work I'm doing or the movie I'm watching?
No, you need to push all your needs down and take care of other people and never take care of yourself.
No, I am taking good care of myself. You have to believe this. I love
Okay,
myself.
as long as you're taking care of yourself,
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying those
If I'm not
superhero
feeling
movies.
good in that session, I'm not doing session actually. I would say no. I am the one who have a lot of pride actually. Actually, I belong to Pakhtun community. I am a Pathan. So they have a lot of pride. They are very aggressive people. I mean, if I would say I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that. Whether you offer me $1 billion for one thing, I'm not going to do that thing. If I say but no one time. So then I have me time, I have music, I have coffee. So I'm enjoying my life by the way. I'm enjoying my work actually.
All right.
So this is all about.
Well, you said you had no friends. I was like, oh no.
Maybe I'm too much busy to doing a lot of things. So, but I'm going to do with friends by the way. I mean, I'm doing this. This is my hyper focus.
Well, I mean, like friends, you can go rock climbing with them, and then you can eat, and then you can go get ice cream, and then you can take a picture by a truck and call it a Prius because it's amusing.
I will socialize occasionally when it is required someplace. Then I am social person. Internally, I'm a me person, loner person.
Well, I don't know that I could not be social. I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm far too.
You don't know that girls are very good in masking. So I know how to mask actually. You don't know, you know the phenomenon of masking.
I know the phenomenon of masking. I just don't know where the joy in masking who you are is. I mean, I suppose that's probably something.
At some part of your life, you need to be, align yourself. Unless you need to understand yourself, then you're going to work. If you don't understand yourself, you're not a good therapist, because a lot of things are going to clash actually. I mean, your own problems, your own emotional problems, and your client problem. How you're going to cope with that? So first, you need to make, peace with yourself. Then you're a good therapist. You need to work on yourself first. And I did that actually. I did that.
I do not think it's that simple. Therapists are humans. We're not robots.
Yes, we are not robots, but we have to accept the fact that we are human. We have certain needs. We can be hurtful. We need to forgive ourselves. That's how we're going to teach other people that you need to live with the condition and you need to forgive yourself. This is what I'm talking about. I mean, you need to embrace.
We're on the same page. I think we're on the same page.
Yes. So that was nice talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. See you very soon for next discussion like that.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
That was a fun, by the way. This was the most
I'm glad.
Amazing discussion I have in 3 months, actually.
Well, anytime. I'm just a phone call away. Bye, Anila.